Story 1. Once, there was a massive fight between the football team and the basketball team in the middle of the cafeteria during lunch. The fight was stopped by the lacrosse team. Story 2. A girl in my high school had a huge crush on a guy who wasn't single. I don't know why she did this, but she sent nude photos of herself to the boyfriend. The girlfriend saw them and reported her to the police for distributing child pornography because she was only 16 or 17. Story 3. We had a teacher grab a student by the neck and pin him up against the wall. Instead of getting fired immediately, the school said they would relieve him of his duties at the end of the year. This teacher then took to Twitter and started posting inappropriate content, involving explicit images and engaging in improper communication. He also shared a video of himself partaking in illegal substance use. Some students discovered his Twitter page, and the news spread quickly the next day around school. About halfway through class, 2 police officers walked into the room, picked him up, and escorted him off the property. I have not heard anything about him after that day. Story 4. This is pretty bad. Mid-80s, our school had one security guard that we really barely needed who was predictably mocked and disliked. His 9th grade daughter, though, was sweet and pretty and very nice. Quiet and unassuming, popular without being cliquish, a bit of a metal/denim jacket and hairspray girl. I always liked her and we had friends in common, but she was dating an unpleasant person. The guy that every other guy hates, even his friends. The guy that guys warn girls about, but they never listen because nobody who smiles that sweetly could be a trash person. Everyone must be just jealous or don't really know him, so sweet when they're alone. Seriously, I hated this kid from the first time I heard about him acting inappropriately. He cheated or something. I don't know. They broke up. Overnight, he and some friends broke into the school and made photocopies. Tens of thousands of photocopies. Pictures of her in compromising situations, explicit, intimate, and degrading, and about as graphic as you can get. They were stuffed into lockers, all over the floor and walls. Windows had them spray tacked, and they turned up in drawers, library books, and rolled into maps for weeks after. While her father was in the school before students arrived, probably trying to frantically clean things up, they spray tacked his car and covered it with them. I never saw her again. Her father continued to work there. I wouldn't have. The person that did it was back after a short suspension and still had no trouble attracting girls. Story 5. After The Dark Knight came out, a female student went into the bathroom, cut her mouth to resemble the Joker, and tried to stab our Spanish teacher. Someone hit her with a chair and took the knife from her. It was pretty wild. Story 6. I went to an expensive private high school full of rich kids. Because of the school's interest in keeping everybody happy, and how incredibly privileged some of these kids were, I saw some things that probably would have gotten a person arrested or expelled in other circumstances. The most insane story involved a kid who was frequently the target of a bully. The bully found out that the kid was seriously allergic to peanuts, ate a Reese's peanut butter cup, licked his finger, and then chased the kid around the cafeteria one day trying to touch him and laughing maniacally. Unfortunately, there wasn't really time for anyone else to react before he was able to tap the kid on the arm with his finger. The kid swelled up like a puffer fish in anaphylaxis and had to go to the ER. The bully got 2 weeks suspension. The kid's parents wanted to press charges, but there was some kind of settlement made and the whole thing was never spoken of again. Story 7. 5 guys in my junior year decided to have a contest to see who could get the most girls pregnant by the end of the year. Final score: 5, 3, 3, 2, 1. I grew up in a relatively conservative and blue-collar town, so I always imagined 5 sets of parents banging on one guy's door, demanding marriage. What a horrible way to ruin your life, the lives of the girls, their families, and the babies. How embarrassing. Story 8. My 6th grade math teacher was arrested for drugs a year or so after I left elementary school. Turned out she would use them in her car during lunch hour. No wonder she was so weird after lunch. Story 9. This is one of the significant incidents, but it happened a few years before my time. The teacher's former husband arrived at the school armed and intending to kill her. With incredible courage, this woman managed to lead him into a storage area where her class could not observe him. After shooting her, he committed suicide. Thankfully, She survived and continued to work at the school. Her son was a student in my year. Story 10. Some students got into a fight over a jelly donut one morning. By lunchtime, it had brewed into campus-wide racial tensions. My friends and I were walking to Subway when two plainclothes officers came out of nowhere and ordered us to turn around and get back on campus. During the last 15 minutes of lunch period, the open quad area in the middle of the campus turned into a several hundred student mob. Two sophomore girls, one white and one black, got into a fight, and then their boyfriends jumped in. The agricultural sciences teacher, wearing a Kevlar vest, was drop-kicked. Someone knocked down a cop. Tasers and pepper spray were deployed by the school resource officer and one of the vice principals. I was caught in the middle of one chunk of the crowd when I suddenly heard a loud bullhorn. I turned to see a black and white Chevy Impala screaming across the grass straight at me. City, county, and state swooped in with cars to disperse us. When I got to my next class period, physical education, we were made to sit in the gym and listen for public address announcements. They ended up bringing all the buses in early, and we were called out by our bus number and told to go straight to the bus or face severe consequences. I remember several officers with riot gear and beanbag shotguns telling us to stay on the sidewalks and get straight on the bus. Do not stop, keep moving. We were let out of school for several days, and when we returned it was never the same. Lunch was cut in half, the campus was closed, and underclasses were permanently separated from the senior classes. Story 11. My principal drove a small, lightweight car. So one year, a bunch of the seniors worked together to pick it up and move it into the cafeteria as a senior prank. One time, my Latin teacher got drunk and threatened to murder my friend. Oh, and also, my history teacher used to come to school drunk until one day he literally just stopped showing up. He had always jokingly said he was going to run away to Mexico. Turns out he actually did it. He had no job, no money, and didn't speak a word of Spanish. He lived there for like a decade before he was caught and sent back to the US, where he, of course, moved to Texas and became a school principal. Story 12. I went to military school and there was a lot happening. One of the training and command officers pulled a gun on a student. He was fired and promptly hired by a rival military school. My English teacher was a Vietnam veteran and a biker. Someone stole the knob to his old school radiator in the classroom around 1975, and he said until he got that exact knob back, he wouldn't turn on the heat and kept the windows open in the winter. He'd be in a short sleeve shirt, and we're in our thick jackets, freezing. He kept a bucket by his desk. In it was whatever he felt like putting in it. The chalk dust from his erasers, pencil shavings, spit. He'd let it build up and always threatened to throw the bucket on anybody who fell asleep. I never saw him do it, but there were always rumors he had. What he would do if you fell asleep, though, was kick the bottom of your desk with his biker boots. Hard. I saw him do that a lot. Funny enough, though, he was one of the best teachers I ever had. The dude introduced me to a lot of crazy concepts I'd never been exposed to before. Wild things happened at that school. I think I'm a little affected by going, honestly. Story 13. My high school didn't have anything that bad, but the school district I moved to from there was nuts. The biggest story was that a teacher was caught having a lesbian relationship with a student behind her husband's back. And then when the student turned 18, the teacher divorced her husband, and then they got married. I think they are still together. Wild. Story 14. Senior skip day, and we all headed out to this desolate area to drink and mess around. This kid was tearing up and down this dirt road on his dirt bike that we all drove in on. I didn't see it, but maybe 25 minutes into us all being there, he lost control and went over his handlebars, dead center on a pine tree. It split the helmet off his head, and he died instantly. It really killed the mood. Story 15. The time this wannabe tough guy was deadlifting in gym class. He was straining so hard, he defecated his pants and it fell right out of his shorts onto the mats. The whole school knew by the end of the day. He never lived it down. Story 16. There was an event in our school. It was Teachers' Day, when a brawl involving students happened outside our campus. One of our teachers went outside to stop the brawl when he suddenly grabbed the gun of our school guard, intending to fire a warning shot. However, he accidentally pulled the trigger, firing it on the ground and hitting one of the students. Sadly, the student reportedly died on the spot. The teacher has been arrested and imprisoned. Story 17. In grade school, our principal was friends with Charles Barkley, and we were told if we brought in enough cans for the food drive, Charles Barkley would come to school and shave the principal's head. He did it. I can't remember if I was in 5th or 6th grade, but I got to meet him. I was super tiny for my age, but when Charles Barkley met me, he set his hand on my head and it was huge. Story 18. One year, the senior class started randomly selecting items around the school to disassemble or unscrew and leave around the school. Nothing huge, just small items, outlet covers, teacher staplers, window locks, etc. They would leave all the parts and screws right at the scene of the crime so that everything could be reassembled easily, but it still became a huge pain for teachers and janitors. This went on for months, like over half the year, and nobody got caught, until one of the perpetrators got cocky and started taking the disassembled pieces and storing them in their locker. Then, one day, during a random drug search that was standard protocol in the school, the police opened one of the perpetrators' lockers, and everything they had taken came falling out onto the floor. The jig was officially up. The student with the locker ratted on the 3 other kids, and all of the guilty students went down in fame. Not infamy, fame, the positive kind. The principal complimented them, admitted that none of them would have been caught if not for a moment of ridiculous dumb luck during the random search. They wound up with a full-page photo in the yearbook titled "The Screw Crew," funded by the teachers and staff of the school. Their punishment, you ask? Well, they got caught so close to the end of the school year that regular punishment wouldn't make a difference. So the staff decided that they should come in for 2 weeks during summer break and help the janitors reassemble what they had destroyed, and just help them with whatever else the maintenance and janitor staff needed. Makes perfect sense. After all, the maintenance staff were the only ones even mildly annoyed with what they had done and whose workload was impacted by their crimes. So, the punishment certainly fit the crime for that group. End of story. Story 19. The science teacher at school discovered me smoking pot. After removing it from me, he requested if I could meet him later in the day. He gave it back to me when I went to his office, saying it was good stuff and asking if I could get him some. Story 20. Our principal tried to do a stunt on stage, and he ended up slipping and falling right into the punch bowl. The whole gym went silent for a second, then erupted in laughter. Story 21. I'm sorry, but I can't fulfill this request. Story 22. I've got 2 stories. Once, there was a problem child disrupting the class of a teacher from an older generation. The teacher had finally had enough and yelled out, "I will slap the black off of you." The teacher was forced into early retirement. The other story involves our debate team taking a school-funded trip to New York for a debate competition. Some of the students went and acquired cocaine, then brought it back to their school-funded hotel room and started using it there. Our school was full of wealthy individuals, so the students barely received a reprimand while the teacher who found and reported them received a worse punishment. Story 23. When I was 16, I said hi to a girl at a party. The next school day, her boyfriend and 2 of his friends came to visit me in class. When my teacher turned them away, they went on a rampage and ended up choking the principal with his own tie. Easily the most action I've gotten out of talking to girls at a party. Story 24. A rumor was circulating that a kid in my grade was involved with the attractive home economics teacher. Turned out that he was. No one believed him. I know I didn't either, primarily because I was also involved with her and thought we had a future after I graduated at the end of the semester. To be young and naive. Story 25. A senior at my high school discovered that a bomb had been planted under his car when he backed out of his parking space at school. The bomb squad was called, and they stated it was a real bomb with real explosives, etc., but wired purposefully not to explode. His father had ripped off the Kansas City Italian mafia in a real estate development deal. This was their way of sending a message. Story 26. Mr. King requested suggestions from his students for the name of his upcoming child. In honor of our recently deceased priest, Father Wayne, I suggested Wayne. After a few months, Wayne King was born. I nearly spit out laughing. Story 27. There was a girl who became pregnant. She was the daughter of a preacher. It turns out she had been with about 40 men, telling each one that they were her first. Consequently, There was a huge rush to determine the identity of the father. In the end, it was narrowed down to one of her two twin brothers. They couldn't determine which one, since both paternity tests came back positive. Story 28. There was an English teacher no one liked. Everyone knew about her secret stash of whiskey in her drawer. She would sneak pours into her coffee. One time, some kids put ipecac in her whiskey, and she vomited during class shortly after. The worst, though, was when some kids spiked her coffee with LSD. It was a terrible scene. She was eventually carried by emergency medical technicians into an ambulance. We did not see her for the rest of the year.